tax cuts that corporations have enjoyed since the Trump years are coming to an end. President Trump's historic Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, signed in 2017, cut the corporate tax rate from 35% to 21%. Proponents say it was a boon to the economy, spurring businesses to invest in innovation, technology, software, equipment, and facilities. Now the Trump-era tax policy is set to expire in 2025, and instead of renewing it, President Biden wants to nix the corporate break, hiking it to 28%.
Former chair of the Ways and Means House Committee, Kevin Brady, and economist Doug Holtz-Eakin penned an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, published at the end of May, asserting that Biden has it backwards when it comes to corporate taxes and that, quote, a reduced rate wasn't a giveaway to large firms. It set off an economic boom and increased wages. Here to dive in deeper on the 2017 tax law and the future of the U.S. economy is Kevin Brady, who is now the spokesman for the Alliance for Competitive Taxation. Welcome, Congressman Brady.
Thanks for having me.
You. So I'm curious as to the math behind drawing the causation argument, rather than just, we saw some economic growth following the tax cuts. What's the math that determines for you it's directly coming from the corporate profit?
Yeah, so we wanted a tax code built for growth of the economy, of jobs, and workers' paychecks, most important. We saw major increases in all of those. And you may remember the reason we did the 2017 tax cuts was because for a decade before that, growth in the U.S. had been really slow. We had one of the most outdated tax codes in the world, so growth was less than 2%. Paychecks were stagnant for literally a decade. And it seemed like every other month there was a new U.S. company that uplifted roots and moved overseas. And so we wanted to stop all that. So we redesigned the tax code. One, we lowered taxes across the board, families, workers, Main Street businesses. But we redesigned the way we taxed so that we could compete. We wanted U.S. companies to be able to compete and win anywhere in the world, including here at home. We wanted America to be the first place for new plants, new research, new innovation. And we wanted to grow the economy in a way that paychecks really surged. And the bottom line is that's exactly what happened. America leapfrogged the most competitive economy. Our economy grew 1% bigger than the experts projected, which in economic terms is a lot. That's big growth. We saw poverty rates hit record lows. 2019 income inequality began to shrink for the first time in half a century. But I think the thing I'm proudest of in the tax reform was that in the 3 years after we put in place those tax cuts, workers' wages grew more in those 3 years, 9%, above inflation, 9%. That's the highest 3 years since the government began recording that information. The point being, workers were getting ahead of the budgets in record ways. And that's why in 2025, we want to extend those tax cuts for workers. About $4 trillion are at stake for workers and families, Main Street businesses, and there are some provisions for corporations that are expiring as well. But it's really important, the economy certainly, but for us, that tax code built for growth started with workers' wages and how we could drive those.
What do you think would be the impact of that tax rate going back up to 28%?
Economically, be devastating. One, it would make America one of the worst, highest taxed countries in the world. I think second highest to our foreign competitors, our main foreign competitors, certainly higher than China. At a time when China is super aggressive and they're targeting American technologies and industries directly, that would be a huge problem. But I think for average workers, for people, for customers of those companies, and certainly economy, you'll see a slower economy. Wages will grow much more slowly. We'll lose jobs as a result of that. So really, coming out of a tough economy and inflation being what it is, you really want to lock down those lower rates for middle-class families, for small businesses, and for companies as well.
So I think what we're seeing in the economic data in terms of quarterly corporate profits after tax, in quarter one of 2017, we were seeing around $2 trillion. And now in quarter one of 2024, we've observed that to be 3.1 trillion. So we're seeing them growing by over a third. A big part of this is the rampant price increases we've seen across the economy in many sectors. And analysis from the Economic Policy Institute shows most of the money from pay increases are going to corporate profits at 54%. And so while we do have, this tax cut in place, do you think a 4% growth rate is enough of an economic boom to justify this wealth transfer from everyday Americans to the top richest people in the country who own and have shares in these corporations?
Yeah, so it really doesn't work that way in my view. One, corporate taxes don't fall on the corporations, just like gas taxes don't fall on the gas station. It's the people buying the gasoline. Corporations, those taxes fall on the workers, falls on their customers in a big way, and then the owners of those companies, which are you and me and our retirement funds for the most part, they bear the burden of taxes. And so what we've seen as America's finally become more competitive, we're seeing better revenues, which is good, but that means better revenues to the government. We're actually collecting more from corporations at 21% rate than we did under 35% rate because they're locating those plants here, those jobs in America. We're growing from that standpoint. And so my point is, look, you may be shooting at corporations for some reason to raise taxes, but you're hitting the workers, certainly the customers, and then the owners of those companies, which tend to be us.
One other thing we wanted to get you to react to, former President Donald Trump had held a rally Sunday in Las Vegas, Nevada, declaring that if reelected, he would not tax tips. Let's watch that.
When I get to office, we are going to not charge taxes on tips, people making tips. We're not going to do it, and we're going to do that right away, first thing in office, because it's been a point of contention for years and years and years, and you do a great job of service, you take care of people, and I think it's going to be something that really is deserved.
Jessica and I debated this on the show yesterday, but Congressman, since we have a tax expert in the House, what is your response to what he's talking about there?
Well, first, doesn't surprise me. I think all through the Trump presidency on taxes, every day he was asking, what are we going to do for the little guy? How are we helping blue-collar workers? So no surprise that he targeted these. So full disclosure, I'm one of these. I want fewer tax cuts for some so we can have lower rates for everyone. So that's sort of where I come from. But I think there's two consequences here. If you want more of something, you tax less of it. So you'll see probably more wages designed toward a tipping type model. But secondly, these service jobs, I was a waiter and a bartender in school. I know how this
So
works.
was Jessica.
Oh, were you?
I paid my bills with it. It wasn't when I was in school, but yeah, I was for many years.
I think a lot of us were. So, tips matter. And I think this is an industry, all these service industries have trouble, hiring people and keeping them. A lot of turnover, all that stuff. So, this is a proposal that might encourage more people, to enter work, into those service type jobs or stay there. If they see that their income, they're rewarded for work. So it's a new idea. I haven't really, delved deep into it. I don't think anyone has, but, I would imagine it's going to be really popular, not in just Nevada, but a lot of service industry workers.
We've seen wages remain relatively stagnant when adjusted for inflation over the past 20 years. I'm curious how we can be certain that money saved or jobs brought home, theoretically, through the incentive of a lower corporate tax rate, how we can be certain that this is translating to wage increases over the long term that are, inflation adjusted higher.
Yeah. So the good news is we have the proof. 2018, 2019, 2020, we saw that 9% increase above inflation for workers. Again, a record for the United States. So that was a real income growth in a big way. Inflation in recent years, has really made it tougher for people to get ahead, obviously. But, if you have the right design of a tax code that encourages growth and growth here in the United States in a big way, in companies investing like in new innovation and new equipment, new plants and all that, you get wage growth without the inflation. And I think that's the key. We want people to get ahead. If you're just sending, stimulus checks or it's government driving this, you're going to get the inflation that wipes away those gains. And my argument always is the corporate tax is really a stealth tax on workers. You don't know it's landing on you, but it is in a real way. And every time in history we've seen those higher. One of the reasons we didn't have wage growth, because our taxes were so high, one of the worst in the world, we couldn't compete anymore in our economy. Remember they told us this is the new normal. there's nothing you can do about a slow economy or stagnant wages. Well, we knew that wasn't the case. And so no tax reform is perfect ever. There's lots of improvements that can be done. In 2025, $4 trillion of tax hikes will occur unless Congress comes together to act. Both parties have a lot at stake. And so there's going to be a lot of work being done between now and the end of 2025 to try to find agreement on those lower taxes for families, small businesses, and companies.
Congressman, thank you so much for joining us
Thanks
today.
for having me.
We really appreciate it. More Rising right after this. Thank you so much.